In today's video, we're recapping No One Gets Out Alive, 2021, a horror mystery film with an IMDb rating of 5.4. Before we dive in, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. A montage of clips from an expedition in 1963 in Mexico, led by Professor Arthur Wells, shows the discovery of an ancient abandoned site in a jungle. They discover numerous human bones, some skeletons missing their skulls, and retrieve a stone box surrounded by butterflies and moths. Later on, an illegal immigrant named Simona is sitting inside a boarding house and talks to her brother on the phone, informing him that she has been having bad dreams lately and wants to come back. Suddenly, lights start flickering, and she notices wet footprints approaching her. A stone box appears out of nowhere and starts moving towards her. Soon, a dark figure with shining eyes appears behind Simona and drags her away towards the basement. After her mother's death, a girl named Ambar illegally travels from Mexico to Ohio, America, without any documentation. She starts working as a seamstress and stays at a local motel. Since Ambar has been staying for over 2 weeks, they require her to submit her ID. After her work, Ambar comes across an advertisement for a cheap boarding house and decides to live there. The boarding house is managed by Red Wells, who asks Ambar to deposit 1 month's rent in advance and mentions that this place is women only, with another resident named Freya who can't speak English. Later that night, Ambar hears sobbing sounds from Freya and can't sleep, so she keeps listening to the voice notes by her mother. The following day, when Ambar goes to work, she notices ash from the door locks on her hands. As she leaves, lights flicker on and off, and she bumps into Freya, who warns Ambar about Red. 2 dark figures watch them from the top floor. Ambar gets scolded by her manager, who asks her to focus on her work as she has progressed slowly. Desperate, Ambar becomes friends with a woman who promises to help her with a fake ID. The lady named Kinsey mentions that the ID rates for Texas are $3,000, but if Ambar wants some cheap ID, she can get an Ohio ID for $1,000. However, Ambar wants an ID from Texas as she lied to her uncle about being born in Texas. After work, Ambar goes to dinner with her mother's cousin, Beto. He promises that Ambar will get a job interview on Friday, but she must bring her American ID. When Ambar gets back home, she hears rumbling sounds and starts to follow the source of the sound, which leads her to the basement door, which is locked. She notices scratch marks on the door frame but gets startled as Red approaches her. Red warns Ambar that the basement and study are off limits, and Ambar informs him that she needs her deposit back to get her fake ID, but Red replies that he has already spent it on house renovations. As Ambar starts counting her savings, she hears Freya crying and decides to check on her. However, as she enters Freya's room, she finds it empty and sees some ash on the doorframe, and a dark figure watches her from the shadows with shining eyes. A distressed Ambar goes to the kitchen to get some coffee and gets flashbacks of her mother on the hospital bed. Suddenly, her mother asks Ambar to look in the corner where a large stone box is located and 2 scary, bony hands emerge from it. Ambar wakes up, realizing it was a dream. Ambar has been sleepless and stressed, so she cannot focus on her work. She gets scolded by her manager, who refuses to pay her in advance and puts her on packing for a day as a punishment. She tries to perform well in packing, but suddenly, Ambar feels a hand moving on her neck from behind her, but she decides to ignore it and continues her work. Worried about her financial condition, Ambar meets her friend Kinsey in a bar after work and pleads that she needs her ID before Friday as she has a job interview. After telling Ambar about her struggle, Kinsey offers to cover the rest of Ambar's ID fee on the condition that Ambar will pay it back soon. When Ambar returns home, she hears thudding sounds from the hallways and notices a man banging his head on a door. Later that night, Ambar notices footsteps in front of her room and hears some sounds of a man slamming his hand on the door, leaving an ash print. Moments later, Ambar goes to the kitchen and meets 2 new tenants, Petra and Maria. And when Red shows them the rooms, Ambar asks him about the man in the hallways. Red replies that it's his brother and leaves, whereas Ambar realizes the study door is open. She enters and finds many ancient artifacts, preserved moths, butterflies, and a tape recorder. She then puts the headphones on and hears a distorted voice that, in return for sacrificing the elderly, women, and children, one will receive blessings. She also notices a picture of a couple in which the face of the man is intentionally destroyed. Ambar comes across a ritual book containing a drawing about people sacrificing humans in front of the stone box. When she touches the picture of the stone box, she hears a screeching sound from the recorder, gets scared, and breaks a picture frame, not noticing a dark figure watching her from the corner. The following day, Ambar finds out that Kinsey has suddenly quit her job and left without a trace, so she asks the boss for her address. The boss gets irritated and fires Ambar, who realizes Kinsey betrayed and ran away with her money. After a tiring day, Ambar takes a shower, hears pleas for help from the drain, and notices the shadow of Freya. When she opens the curtain, Freya disappears, which scares Ambar, who bumps into Red and asks him about Freya. Red informs Ambar that Freya left a few days ago. He also mentions that he will return Ambar's deposit tomorrow, and Ambar finally sighs in relief. Ambar then goes to bed and listens to her mother's voice recordings when she gets irritated by a moth and kills it with her hand. Moments later, it comes back to life, shocking Ambar, and she watches her dead mother on the foot of her bed, spooking her awake. She realizes that it was just a dream. However, her bedroom door is wide open, and as she sits up, the lights go out. She then hears crying sounds from outside, decides to look for the source, and catches a glimpse of another figure from the room before her. She sees footsteps approaching her and gets visions from the past when Mary forcefully prepares a frightened woman for the ritual. But the young victim fights back, and moments later, Ambar hears the crying sounds and finds the victim in front of the basement, begging for mercy from Mary to not listen to Arthur. Both Ambar and Mary watch monstrous-looking hands pulling the victim to the basement, which makes Ambar extremely terrified. And with shivering hands and shaky breath, she starts packing her belongings in a bag while repeatedly trying to connect with her Uncle Beto. Soon, he picks up the call and sounds concerned that Ambar called him in the middle of the night, hoping everything is all right. Ambar begs him to pick her up, but unfortunately, Beto is out of town and can't help now. He advises her to call the cops, and Ambar finally confesses that she's an illegal immigrant. Beto promises to help her as soon as he can. Ambar takes her bag and knocks on Red's door to ask for her deposit money since she is out of cash. However, Becker opens the door and states that Red is not available. Ambar does not want to live in this house, so she immediately leaves. However, she cannot find any place to stay in cold weather because she has no cash. Ambar then goes to a diner and dreams about herself on the train. She's all alone, and the lights start flickering on and off when she notices her dead mother and the stone box. Suddenly, the monster emerges from the box, and Ambar realizes it was a dream. After having a tiring day in a snowstorm, Ambar asks for another cup of coffee but gets extremely uncomfortable as a police officer arrives. She calls Red to meet her, and soon he comes, mentioning that he left the money at home, saying he fought with Becker, who didn't want him to return the deposit money. A very cunning Red convinces Ambar to go back despite her reluctance. Upon arriving back, Ambar immediately decides to go back to her room to collect the money, as Red lied to her about putting the money there. When Ambar cannot find the money anywhere, Red appears there with alcohol and offers her to drink it. Ambar refuses, and Red talks about how this house is weird and informs Ambar about his father, who used to dig up and collect strange stuff, and he also killed their mother. Ambar gets uncomfortable and wants to leave, but Red gets in her way. He also adds that Becker needs her, and Ambar starts cursing at Red when suddenly Becker appears and forcefully puts alcohol inside her mouth. Red warns Ambar that if she tries to leave, Becker will make it difficult. Later that night, Maria and Petra request Ambar to let them enter her room, and she agrees after confirming that they are not accompanied by anyone else. They discuss with Ambar that Becker is dangerous and they should leave soon, but can't leave now because Becker is always awake in the basement and sleeps during the day. Ambar feels suspicious that they are keeping other women in the basement. All three women share everyday experiences of dreaming about their loved ones and seeing a stone box even when awake. Petra believes that the box is in the basement. She also mentions hearing cries of women every night. When Maria gets upset and states that she wants to go back home, Petra tries to calm her down by singing for her, and Ambar sees the shadows of dead women standing across the room. As the shadows disappear, Ambar and Petra also leave the bed. Ambar sees her mother begging her to stay a little longer, but she wakes up and watches the brothers take Petra and Maria. The women desperately fight back, but Becker overpowers them as the doorbell rings and Ambar is locked in a room. She watches Beto from her window, breaks the glass and begs him to help her. He hits Red and enters the house. Sadly, Becker beats Beto to death as Ambar watches his broken teeth and blood from her door. An enraged Becker orders Red to prepare Ambar as he takes Maria away to the basement. Ambar pleads to Red to let her go, but he informs her that sacrificing women will help cure his brother's sickness. He also mentions that his father, Arthur, used to force their mother to help him sacrifice the woman. Later, he killed her, so both brothers decided to get rid of him, but Becker became obsessed with the box and continued the sacrifices. Ambar almost convinces Red to let her go, and he opens her chain lock when Becker appears and takes Ambar away. She notices ghosts of women in the hallways, and the sacrificial room is lit with candles around a stone table in front of a stone box. Becker moves Maria's headless body and chains Ambar to a stone table before opening the stone box. As Becker leaves, Ambar hears the sound of a monster approaching her from the box, and butterflies and moths start to fly all over the place. Beto appears and unchains Ambar, and then they escape through the back door and watch two decapitated bodies. Lights flicker, and Beto disappears while Ambar finds herself in her mother's hospital room. Her mother keeps begging Ambar to stay so that the monster can eat her, but Ambar notices that something is wrong and kills her mother by suffocating her with a pillow. When the monster notices that Ambar has woken up, it retreats, returns to the box, and closes the lid. Ambar opens the box only to find the bones inside and decides to leave. She hears Petra struggling and takes an ancient sword from the study room, which makes Becker suspicious that something is wrong. As Red opens the door, Ambar strikes him with a sword and Petra frees herself. Then Becker pushes Ambar to the floor and breaks her ankle. He then throws Petra away from the top floor, and she dies. Next, Becker tries to kill Ambar as well, but she holds a piece of the sword shard and cuts his jugular vein, then kills him with the sword. Eventually, Ambar asks Red for the sacrifice and tries to leave. As the creature accepts her sacrifice, Red's ghost appears in front of Ambar. Soon, she notices the effects of sacrifice as her injuries begin to heal, and ominous veins appear on her head, just like Becker. She looks back at the basement, extends her hand, and lets a moth sit on it.